The lungs of the earth are going to be given back to it, which is all these trees and all of these flowers, and it's going to be a whole total different vibration.
The glory of Lebanon shall come unto thee, the fir tree, the pine tree, and the box together, to beautify the place of my sanctuary, and I will make the place of my feet glorious. The whole earth is at rest and is quiet. They break forth into singing. Yea, the fir trees rejoice in thee, and the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since thou art laid down, no fella is come up against us.
Because the Lord is going to restore everything. You're going to have a total different vibration on the earth, a total different smell. You're not going to be walking down the street and smell shit and piss, and no foul odors or nothing like that, because the lungs of the earth are going to be given back to it, which is all these trees and all of these flowers, and it's going to be a whole total different vibration. You're going to see the aura and how things are going to change and how elevated things are going to be. Our senses are going to be heightened, Everything about us is going to be glorified.
The glory of Lebanon shall come unto thee, the fir tree, the pine tree, and the box together, to beautify the place of my sanctuary, and I will make the place of my feet glorious. The whole earth is at rest and is quiet. They break forth into singing. Yea, the fir trees rejoice in thee, and the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since thou art laid down, no fella is come up against us. The whole earth is at rest and is quiet. They break forth into singing.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Kakwadash, double hundreds unto the apostles and the elders of GMS, whom rule well, teach well, being great examples towards younger brothers. And peace and blessing, salutation to the hopeful lake out there pushing his word and truth. And in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh Bashim Shah, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful leg, the believers, the listeners whom have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bashim Shah. And what I want to get into is a continuation on the book of 1 Corinthians. All right, and we made to the 15th chapter. I've done the part 1. We went through part 1, and now, we're going to go through the part 2. All right, of 1 Corinthians. And this is going to be emphasis on the resurrection and first fruits. The first part was mainly, going into the witness of Yahweh Shai, the apostles. Okay, ending with, the apostle Paul, who was an apostle appointed, ordained, okay, by Yahweh Shai himself. Now, Salaki, we started at verse 12, from 12 to 22. All right, it goes into the resurrection, and also Apostle Paul goes into the analogy of the first fruits, which goes into a law, okay, going back to what they will call the law of Moses. And I got a chat, I got something I pulled up from the chat that gives a good explanation and a good comparison of Yahweh Shai and how he even fulfills, the law of the first fruit, which as Yahweh Shai fulfilled the law, not only did he, fulfill, the 613 laws, all right, but also being a representation of, the lamb, sacrificial lamb, the scapegoat, and also, the kinsman redeemer, okay, and then going into the law of the first fruits, how he fulfilled that as well, so even with, rituals and certain high holy days, Yahweh Shai, he fulfilled it all, he fulfilled the law on the level that can't be done. It can't be duplicated, okay, and he did it, on behalf of, all right, the nation of Israel, beginning with the elect. Okay, so when you go here, let's go here, 1 Corinthians 15 and 12. But tell me this, all right, since we preach that Yahweh Shah rose from the dead, why are some of you saying that there will be no resurrection of the dead? Okay, so you had this, all right, apostasy, okay, false doctrine, there was that had risen, amongst, okay, the church of Corinth, all right, that there was no resurrection of the dead, okay, and this is also a doctrine held by the Sadducees. Now, let's go here real quick. The Sadducees also had, okay, that doctrine, that ideology of no resurrection, okay, and what you have to understand about the Sadducees, that they was Hellenized. They was priests, but they was Hellenized. Okay, even the chief priest, who was a Sadducee, okay, these were Israelites, all right, Levites, priests that was Hellenized, okay, and they was of the upper echelon, they was within the elites, okay, they was amongst the elites of the Roman Empire, okay. So when you go into what they believe, and we're going to go into an account, to get some edification on the resurrection and what it means for us, okay, because the resurrection is heavy. All right. Now it said the Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection, and this denial was a core part of their theology. They rejected the idea of an afterlife, a spiritual world like angels, and the concept of a resurrection of the dead, believing that life ended at death. This position led them to reject other supernatural beliefs and focus solely on the earthly and material world, because the Sadducees, they was of the upper echelon. They had palaces and wealth. Okay, you had to be, all right, of a certain status to be a Sadducee. All right, now the Pharisees, you can be a common Israelite and be a Pharisee. Okay, but of the Sadducees, you had to be of the upper echelon. The Sadducees remind you of like a black boule of today. Okay, or like the gatekeepers. You see, so they didn't believe in nothing but the right now. Okay, it said this position led them to reject other supernatural beliefs and focus solely on the earthly and material world. And this is why they confronted Yahweh Shah with a tricky question about resurrection based on the Levirate, all right, or Levitical marriage customs. Okay, and we're going to get that account, all right, because it's going to explain, all right, resurrection as Yahweh Shah taught it. Okay, and what, his resurrection meant for us. Okay, so let's go here. So let's go back to 1 Corinthians. We're going to read down a little bit, then we'll segue into that the account with Yahweh Shai. All right, and the Sadducees. So let's go back to 1 Corinthians 15. Okay, so this, which I say that the Sadducees, they was, all right, they was Hellenized priests, and the Corinthians coming from a heavily, city that was Hellenized. All right, you can see how that doctrine, okay, that false doctrine, all right, made its way to the church. Okay, so Apostle Paul's going to expound, on this. Okay, so 1 Corinthians 15 and 13 said, for if there is no resurrection of the dead, then Yahweh Shai has not been raised either. Okay, so he's like, look, if there's no resurrection of the dead, well, that means Yahweh Shai wasn't resurrected. Okay, it says, and if Yahweh Shai has not been raised, then, all right, all our preaching is useless and your faith is useless, and we apostle would be lying about the Most High, for we have said that the Most High raised Yahushua from the grave. But that can't be true if there is no resurrection of the dead. So Apostle Paul is like, look, if there's no resurrection of the dead, all right, our gospel is pointless. We don't have no good news. Okay, if there's no resurrection. If it's just death and that's it, then we don't have, okay, no gospel. We don't have no good news. You see? It says, and if there is no resurrection of the dead, then Yahushua, all right, has not been raised. And if Yahushua has not been raised, then your faith is useless and you are still guilty of your sins. In that case, all who have died believing in Hamashiach are lost. Okay? And if our hope in Yahushua is only for this life, we are more to be pitied than anyone in the world. Okay? Because if our hope, begins and ends in just this life, okay, he said we should be pitied more than anyone in the world. Okay? So Apostle Paul is letting them know, like, look, this is the foundation of everything we teach, and is the resurrection of Yahushua. Because his resurrection, all right, not only was it a miracle and showed the Most High's power, but it symbolized something greater. Okay, and when you go to this parable dealing with, all right, the Sadducees, all right, his Yahushua's encounter with the Sadducees, then we can expound on that. We'll get that word resurrection. All right, because it can go, it can mean, multiple things. Okay, but when you go here, all right, this is Matthew 22 and 23. Okay, it says that same day, Yahushua was approached by some Sadducees, religious leaders who say there is no resurrection from the dead. They posed this question. Now, we have to understand the Sadducees believe that there is no spiritual world. When you die, it's over. And then they didn't believe in reincarnation, that you will come back, that spirits are recycled. Okay, so they didn't believe in reincarnation, or, that they didn't believe that someone can be resurrected from the dead. They didn't believe that, your spirit went to the spiritual realm, and they didn't believe in reincarnation, that spirits, will be, that spirits cycle back in different flesh. They just believed in the right now. Okay, so Yahushua is going to cut them, okay, with scripture. Okay, and we're going to expound on these things. It says that same day Yahushua was approached by some Sadducees, religious leaders, who say there is no resurrection from the dead. They posed this question: Teacher, Moses said if a man dies without children, his brother should marry the widow and have a child who will carry on the brother's name. Okay, because that's a law, when you go into, all right, what you do, Deuteronomy 25, 5 and 6. Okay, so you go to that law about, all right, if your brother died and he didn't leave an heir. Okay, now if he had an heir, you weren't obligated to take on his wife. Okay, but if he didn't have an heir, a male son to inherit, okay, and keep his line going, then you would take on his wife to raise an heir, okay, for his line, all right, to keep that inheritance within, okay, the family. You see, because if the woman, married, all right, another man, okay, well, their inheritance will be removed from their family. Okay, say those brothers, it was 4 brothers and they split the inheritance from their father. Okay, and if one brother died with no heir, okay, and their woman, if she were to marry another man, well, their inheritance will be removed from that family. Okay, and there'll be another man's. Okay, so to keep the inheritance, okay, within that family, all right, the brother will raise an heir, all right, for his brother that died, not leaving the heir. Okay, so that was the main purpose of that was for inheritance. You see, so that was part of the law, which, you had some people in the country who, I think Sinella, he had lost his mind about that law. Okay. Like, and it's something how nigga culture act like they just got the most, wholesome culture when it comes, okay, to marriage and relationships. Okay, to where they hear something of the law that's different from what they're used to, then they just, go crazy. But, that's neither here or there. All right, but just explaining their custom, okay, as we the Spirit has been having us touch on our customs more and more. All right, so verse 25 said, well, suppose there were 7 brothers. The oldest one married and then died without children. So his brother married, all right, the widow. But the second brother also died, and the third brother married her. This continued with all 7 of them. So it was a time when, okay, so they're given a hypothetical question. Okay, so what if, all right, this woman, her husband died and she has to marry her brother to get her heir, and none of the brothers give her an heir, and she ends up marrying, 7 brothers. Okay, so they give him a hypothetical question. So it says, last of all, the woman also died. So tell us, whose wife would she be in the resurrection? Okay, for all 7 were married to her. Yahushua replied, your mistake is you don't know the scriptures, okay, and you don't know the power of the Most High. Okay, so when you go here to understand, let's go here. It says, for when the dead rise, they will neither marry nor be given into marriage. And see, this is when someone dies and goes to the spiritual realm. Okay, when they're in the spiritual realm, all right, they don't have the urges of this realm, because you have a resurrection, the spirit rising from the body and going back to the spiritual realm. Okay, and in the spiritual realm, there is no marriage. All right, the affairs of this world doesn't transfer to the spiritual realm. Okay, it says, in this respect, they will be like the angels in heaven. Now, let's go here to the book of Job. Okay, because Job, was he, he wished, he was catching so much hell, he was wishing that, he would have just been stillborn, back in the spiritual realm. All right, so when you go here, okay, this is Job 3:17. It said there, all right, it says there the wicked, and speaking of the spiritual realm, all right, after you die, your spirit goes back, okay, to the Father. Okay, go to the spiritual realm. You see, this body, it decays, but the spirit goes back to the Father. Okay, it says there the wicked cease from troubling. So even the wicked, all right, go to the spiritual realm. That's why Saul, okay, Samuel told Saul, look, you gonna be with me tomorrow, because he was gonna die, in battle. And Samuel let him know, like, look, you gonna be with me, because Samuel had died, but he was summoned by a familiar spirit, a witch. Okay, and he told Saul, look, you're gonna be with me. And Saul was what? Recorded to be wicked, to be rejected of the Most High, but he still went to the spiritual realm. All right, show you there's no such thing as hell. It said, there the wicked cease from troubling, and there the weary be at rest. Okay, so when the Edomite dies, he's not in the spiritual realm. All right, terrorizing the spiritual realm, being the demon. All right, he got to go up there and sit his ass down. Okay, but what he was in in this realm doesn't transfer over to that realm. Okay, and it says they that be weary. Okay, someone is impoverished, catching hell. Okay, well, they're at rest. They don't have to deal with bills and being late for work and transmission going. They don't have to deal with those things. They're at rest. Okay, debt. All right, they don't have to deal with those things. Those things don't transfer, okay, to the spiritual realm. It says there the prisoners rest together, they hear not the voice of the oppressor. Yeah. All right. So you go, you die. Okay. And a couple years later, your supervisor died. He's not your supervisor in the spiritual realm. Okay. Telling you about, how you was bullshitting on the earth. He tell how sorry of an employee was, how disappointed he was at you. No, man. Okay. It says the small and the great are there. The servant is free from his master. Okay. So the affairs of the spiritual realm don't transfer. The affairs of this realm don't transfer over to the spiritual realm. Okay. You go back. All right. You get your judgment. Okay, for what you did in his life, and you sit down until you're sent back, and we're gonna get that aspect of it as well. Until you're reincarnated, okay, until you're regenerated back in the earth. Okay, so that's why Yahushua said, "Well, you err, not knowing the scriptures." Okay, because in the spiritual realm, the affairs of the earthly realm, all right, don't translate. Okay, your status and who you were, and the world's richest man. When you go to the spirit world, all right, those titles and that accolades don't, you see, you're judged based off righteousness. Okay, right or wrong. Okay, and you're given a judgment. All right, and you're sent back. All right, you're regenerated to play that judgment out in the earth. Okay, so go back here. Which is a whole nother topic, but we're gonna touch on it. Okay, some degree. Okay, it says, Ecclesiastes 12:7. It says, "Then shall the dust return to the earth as it was with these bodies." Okay, and these bodies are made out of the elements. Okay, and there's a spirit within these bodies. So when the spirit leaves the body, okay, the body returns back to the earth. Okay, and the spirit shall return unto the Most High who gave it. Okay, so this is why Yahushua said, "Y'all niggas err. Y'all don't know the scriptures." And okay, you're trying to put the Most High in the box. All right. See, the Sadducees, they was extremely carnal, extremely earthly. It wasn't spiritual at all. The Pharisees, like I say, they was over righteous. Okay, but they were more spiritual than the Sadducees. Okay, you had some sincere Pharisees, man. Okay, like the Apostle Paul. Okay, so going back, all right, or Gamaliel, he had a good report. Okay, which was the teacher of Apostle Paul, but he he vouched for the apostles, in the Sanhedrin. You go to the book of Acts. All right, so Matthew 22, okay, and 29 again, it says, "Yahushua answered and said unto them, Ye do err, all right, not knowing the scriptures, nor the power of the Most High, nor the resurrection. All right, for in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels, okay, of the Most High in heaven. But as touching the resurrection of the dead, have you not read that which was spoken unto you, all right, by the Most High, saying, I am the power of Abraham, all right, the power of Isaac, and the power of Jacob. The Most High is not the power, okay, of the dead, but of the living." You see, and what was he saying? Because immortality was promised to a particular lineage, the sons of God. Okay. Okay. All right. And Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was known as what? The forefathers of the promise. Okay. Because these men, okay, along with the whole nation of Israel, would have to constantly be regenerated. All right. Until the time of Yahushua. All right. Which when we were going to be changed to immortal. Even those that are dead, that are actually dead, was going to be resurrected to immortality. Okay, showing you what these spirits of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, okay, have been coming back. Okay, and it's a cycle. It's a constant cycle of us being regenerated until the time, the second coming of Yahushua, all right, in which beginning with the first fruits, we're going to be changed to immortal. Okay? So the Most High is not the power of the dead, but of the living. You see? And let's go here real quick, because even when you go to let's get this in second Esdras, and we'll come back to Matthew. All right, let's get this in second Esdras. Okay, this is the book of second Esdras, chapter 4. Okay, so Esdras was inquiring about the end. He was inquiring about the kingdom. He was complaining about captivity. So as the Most High sent your archangel to, all right, dialogue, all right, with Esdras and show him, visions of the end. Okay, you get to second Esdras chapter 4 and verse 34 says, I started 33, said, then I answered and said, how and when shall these things come to pass? Okay, wherefore are our years few and evil? So Esdras is inquiring about when, all right, the kingdom is going to be, because our forefathers understood the promises of a kingdom for Israel. Okay, an eternal kingdom. They understood these things. They understood Yahweh. They was asking about Yahushua. Okay, they was asking about when are all our people going to be righteous, man. Okay, they was inquiring of these things, and he answered me saying, all right, do not thou hasten above the Most High, okay, for thy haste in vain to be above him, for that has much exceeded. So Uriel was like, look, you're moving too fast. Things have to play out. Okay, the Lord, and there's prophecy that have to play out. We ain't got to that point yet. Okay, and during this time, during the Medo-Persian Empire, there's a lot still left to happen. Okay, and that's why we're in such beautiful times now, man, because so much of the Lord's word has been fulfilled to we're right here to being perfected, man. To being changed. Okay, to being immortal, man. You see, and this is what our forefathers, was inquiring about. All right, but there was a lot left that happened during this time dealing with Esdras. Okay, in the book of second Esdras, it said, did not the souls also the righteous ask questions of these things in their chamber, saying, how long shall I hope on this fashion? When cometh the fruit of the floor of our reward, the reward for Israel? Okay, the reward for Israel. You see, so even the souls of the righteous, are inquiring, okay, in the spiritual realm about, all right, the kingdom for Israel, man. You see, how many captivities, how long we're gonna have to, and the angel's gonna expound on it. It says, and unto these things Uriel the archangel gave them answer and said, even when the number of seeds is fulfilled in you. So whenever you're finished your reincarnations, all right, because these spirits will have to be what? Regenerated back in the earth. Okay, because there's two concepts of resurrection. You can be, the Lord can put, all right, the spirit, you can, you have accounts in the Bible where men, okay, will die, even women, certain women, all right, and the Lord, all right, will resurrect them. He will put that spirit in their same body and bring their body back to life. Reanimate that same body. All right, then you have the concept of being regenerated back in the earth. Okay, that's why I said even when the number of seeds is filled in you. So there's a complete time, all right, that we will have to continually, be regenerated in the earth until a fulfilled time. And we in that time now. This is no doubt. This is our last time having to be, regenerated back in the earth. Okay, reincarnated back in the earth. Okay, before this change, before we're changed. All right. And if we have to be martyrs for Yahushua, well, this is the last time. All right. Because this resurrection of those that die in Yahushua, in this time, this is it. They're going to be raised immortal now. Okay, and this is the whole purpose of the gospel and the hope. Okay, was going into this time, all right, of us being changed in this final resurrection, man. Okay, and Apostle Paul, he's going to expound on this more, as we go back in 1 Corinthians. It said, for he have weighed the world, okay, in the balance. You see, by measure have he measured the times, and by number have he numbered the times, and he doth not move nor stir them until the said measure be fulfilled. So until, all right, the time appointed, okay, we will have to, we had to keep coming back, reincarnated, okay, resurrected back, same spirit, new bodies, but because you go into this word resurrection, and then we're going to get that also in Matthew as well. Let's go to this word resurrected. Okay, let's get this word resurrected. No, that's not it. Pull it up in the Edom, Salaki. So I pulled this word up, resurrection, in the Edom online. Now I pray it's making sense. I'm trying to not to be too all over the place. All right, so you go to the word resurrection. All right, now as we know, the resurrection, the rising of Yahweh. All right, after his death and burial, which we're going to go into what that means. Okay, and the analogy that Apostle Paul gave with the first fruits. Okay, it expounds on that resurrection, what it means for us perfectly. Okay, so it says, and directly from the church Latin, resurrectium, okay, or resurrectio, all right, a rising again from the dead, okay, to rise again, to lift oneself, to appear again, to be restored, okay. You see, to rise again, to lift oneself, to appear again, to be restored. All right, this is from which is again, and surgi, which is to rise again. When you go into resurrected, okay. So you have, the resurrection of, the Most High can put, all right, that's spirit back in the body and raise that same body up, okay. Or he can make that spirit, all right, rise again on the scene, okay. He can restore that spirit back to the earth in a new body. Okay. And also he can restore a whole kingdom. He can make a kingdom be resurrected. You see? Just as we're living in, okay, the Greco-Roman Empire again. Okay, it has been resurrected because those spirits of the ancient Greco Empire have what? Okay, they have appeared again. They have been restored. Okay, just with more technology this time. Okay, so that's why even when you go here, as we got this, I believe the other day, but let's go here to Daniel just to prove that from that aspect of resurrection. Okay, so you go to the book of Daniel. Remember, one of the definition of resurrection was to appear again. Okay, so when you go into the book of Daniel, chapter 12, what was told Daniel? Okay, Daniel 12 and 13, it said, but go thy way to the end be, for thou shalt rest. Okay, you see that? So let you know this ain't the end of Daniel. When he dies, it's not the end. The Sadducees had their bugged out doctrine, like once you die, it's just it. No, this is not the end of Daniel. Okay, and stand in thy lot at the end of days. So he will come back in the end. Okay, he will be regenerated in the earth. Okay, and he will be here in the end. You see, So when you go here to this word, all right, stand in not lot. So you go into this word, all right, stand, which is the Hebrew word amad, all right, amad, which I want to go. Yep, it says to what? It says to stand upright, okay, to rise, to be erect, resurrect, okay, back again, okay. It says to arise, to appear, to come on the scene, to arise, to appear, to come on the scene, to stand forth, to appear, okay, to rise up or against. All right, well, this is another form of being resurrected back into the earth, man. Okay, so until, all right, that process of, us being regenerated into the time of Yahushua, which, all right, we're going to prove that. Okay, well, let's get this here in Matthew. Hold on, let me pull it back up. All right, so now when you go to Matthew, okay, I pray that this is making sense. You see, well, this is Matthew 19, okay, and 27. All right, then answered Peter and said unto him, Behold, we have forsaken all and followed thee. What should we have therefore? All right, so Apostle Peter, like, look, we've forsaken everything. Okay, you see, we've forsaken everything. What are we going to get? Okay, and Yahushua said unto them, Verily I say unto you, that ye which have followed me in the regeneration, when the Son of Man shall sit in the throne of his glory. See, it wasn't time. So unless Peter, okay, unless the apostles, those that follow Yahushua, unless, okay, they will be reincarnated, they will keep coming back reincarnated until the time Yahushua sat on the throne. There's no way that they can receive a reward if you remove reincarnation, okay, or the resurrection, okay, because some of these people that follow Yahushua, they're not living right now. They're in the spiritual realm, so they will have to be what? Resurrected, okay, from the sense that they will have to be, resurrected from the graves. You see? So it says, in the regeneration, when the Son of Man shall sit in the throne of his glory, you also shall sit upon 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So let's get this word regeneration. All right. Which, when you break that word down, is, going back to back, like resurrection, and gene, okay, or seed, like he told Esdras, until the seeds be fulfilled in you. Okay, because he could have said until you complete your regenerations, or your reincarnations. All right, so you go to the Greek word
Strong's G 3824. Polygenesia.
polygenesia. Okay, so let's get. Let me see real quick. All right, so let's go to this word regeneration. All right, which says what? A new birth. Okay, same spirit, but what? A new birth, a reproduction, reproducing that same spirit, regeneration, regenerating that same spirit. Okay, or recreation. Recreation, what? Putting that same spirit in new flesh. Okay, so it will be during the regeneration. Okay, that's why you have the prophets, so many prophets back today, because it's time for their reward. You see, because Yahushua is getting ready to sit his throne. Okay, so Apostle Paul is telling the church of Corinth, like, look, if it ain't no resurrection, what are we doing? We can pack it up. You see, Apostle Paul was telling the church, like, look, if y'all don't believe in the resurrection, we can pack it up. You know, we can shut this whole thing down. What are we doing? Okay, you see, so even when you go here, let's get that regeneration in the Edom online. All right. So let's get the word regeneration. All right. It says act, okay, of regeneration or producing the new. Originally spiritual, also of the resurrection. You see? And directly from the Latin regeneratinium, okay, a being born again. A being born again, man. Same spirit back reincarnated to make over, to generate again, to generate that same spirit in another flesh. Okay, to be got, to produce. Okay, because re goes into again, and genera means to what? Bring forth, to be got, to produce. Okay, to reproduce, to be reborn. Okay, so Apostle Paul, like, look, man, y'all can't get this concept. Then it really ain't nothing else to talk about. You know, there's no way you can, continue on if you don't get this concept. All right, and this is why people that don't understand reincarnation, the gospel goes over their head. Okay, people that don't understand reincarnation. All right, you see. So let's go here. Okay, because in the kingdom, everybody's going to be restored. Okay, to, all right. Everybody's going to be restored to those blessed estates and those new bodies, man. Okay. And so we finna come into the benefits of being, okay, Israelite sons of God, man. The payoff. Matthew 8:11, it says, and I say unto you that many shall come from the east and the west and shall sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. How is that going to be possible, man? Okay. The resurrection. All right. Either we're going to be changed, okay, to immortals, or we're going to be resurrected. We're going to be, all right, risen immortal from the grave. Okay. So either we're going to be changed in this regeneration that we're in now, or either you're going to be resurrected to immortals, man. Okay. That's why Yahweh said this in the book of John, chapter 11. Okay, dealing with Lazarus. All right, which Lazarus, all right, goes into Isaiah. Okay, which is help, of the Most High. All right, Azariah, Al-Azariah, okay, which is help of the Most High. Okay, so then let's go here. This is John 11:21. So this is Lazarus. He's still in the tomb before Yahweh resurrects him and bring him back to life. Okay, so this is a dialogue between his sister Martha and Yahweh. St. John 11:21. Then said Martha unto Yahweh, Lord, if thou hadst been there, my brother had not died. But I know that even now, whatsoever thou wilt ask the Most High will give it thee. Yahweh said unto her, so she had faith, It said, thy brother shall rise again. Okay, thy brother shall rise again. Martha said unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection, okay, at the last day. Okay? Speaking of this time. All right? But Yahushua said unto her, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet he shall live. You see? Though he were dead, yet he shall live. So if we're truly of the elect, predestined to be in Yahushua, we're immortal. Okay? Whether we're going to be changed, we're going to, the Lord's going to preserve us and we're going to be changed and go into the chariots, or, if we have to be martyrs, we're going to be risen again. We're going to rise again immortal. Okay? So there's no death in Yahushua. Yahushua is life. He is the resurrection. You see? He is the immortality, man. Okay? That's why it says what this in Isaiah. Okay? Isaiah 62. All right, Isaiah 62 and 11 says, Behold, the Lord hath proclaimed unto the end of the world. Say ye to the daughter of Zion, Behold, thy salvation cometh. Behold, his reward is with him, and his work before him. So Yahushua, okay, he's coming with immortality, man. For those that, are living in his coming, and those who have died in him. They're both going to get their reward of immortality, man. Okay? You see? And let's go here. Get a couple more. And this, it's a lot to go into this, but, I just want to touch the main point. I'll get about two more. And we'll go back. What's that in, I think the second. It might be First Thessalonians. Yeah. All right, First Thessalonians chapter 4. All right, in verse 14. Okay, he said, For if we believe that Yahushua died and rose again, even so them also which sleep in Yahushua, the Most High will bring with him. So those that have died in Yahushua, they're going to be on those chariots even before those, all right, that remain. They're going to be resurrected, even before we're caught up in the air, or those that remain are caught up in the air. Okay, so for this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord shall not prevent them which are asleep. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, with the trump of the Most High, and the dead in Yahushua shall rise first. Okay, rise first, rise again, be resurrected to immortality, man. So this is that final resurrection. Okay. It says, then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds. We're going to rise and be changed to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. Wherefore comfort one another with these words, man. Okay, so all our forefathers from old, had to keep coming back. All the elect, even, certain women, they had to keep coming back. Okay, until this final time that we in now. Okay, in which we're going to be changed, okay, or risen from the grave, those that have to die in Yahushua and be good, and this is why, we look at death differently, man. Understanding this, we go into Jacob trouble with a different concept of death, man, because we know he is, all right, and his son Yahushua is the resurrection. Okay, this is Revelation 14 and 13. And I heard a voice from heaven saying unto them, Right, blessed are the dead which died in the Lord from henceforth. Yes, said the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, and their works do follow them. Okay? So after the resurrection of Yahweh Shai, those that die in, all right, those that will die in Yahweh Shai from that point on out, they will be good. You know, they will still have part of their first dominion. Okay? They will be part of the elect. All right, they're still written in the book of life. You know, they will be caught up in this cycle of being regenerated, okay, until this last time. Okay? So they were solid. You know, all those believers that died during those Roman persecutions and, you know, eaten by wild animals and had to fight to the death, and they're back to get their reward. You see? Revelation 11 and 18. Revelation 11, 18. And it says, and the nations were angry, and thy wrath is come. In the time of the dead that they should be judged, and then thou shouldest give reward unto thy servants the prophets and the saints and them that fear thy name, small and great, and shouldest destroy them which destroy the earth, man. So we in the time of being rewarded. All those, you know, those works from past ages are going to be rewarded now. You know, we read about our forefathers and how they stood stiffly for righteousness. Well, they're going to be rewarded now forever. You see, they, you know, everyone, you know, those 7 brothers. Okay, reading the book of Maccabees, their mother, they're finna be rewarded forever. Okay, you see, but you have to believe in their resurrection, man. Now, when you go back to 1 Corinthians 19, well, it's like 15, 1 Corinthians 15. Ain't no 1 Corinthians 19. All right, just a Genesis Bible. You know, them niggas will pop up with 1 Corinthians 19. You know, trying to prove all the heathens, you know, can make it. This 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 17. It says, and if Yahweh shall be not raised, your faith is in vain, and ye are yet in sins, because Yahweh Shai's death and resurrection representing forgiveness of sin. Okay, it represents a new relationship, okay, between Israel and the Most High through Yahweh Shai. Okay, because Yahweh Shai is that living mediator between, okay, Israel and the Most High. Okay, he went back to be placed at the right hand of the Father to be a mediator and a high priest. Okay, but if their resurrection didn't happen, okay, there's no mediator. Okay, so then they which are falling asleep in Hamashiach are perished. If in this life only we have hope in Hamashiach, we are, all right, we are of all men most miserable. Okay, now as you read on, yep, so let's read on. It said, but now in Yahweh Shai, all right, but now is Yahweh Shai risen from the dead and became the first fruits of them that slept. Okay, we're going to get into that. For since by man came death, by man came also the resurrection of the dead. So for also, all right, for as in Adam all die, all right, because that was the fall. Okay, started with Adam, you know, started with the serpent, the Eve, and then okay, Adam, you know, he fell. You know, he took heed to, you know, Eve, and he fell. Okay, even so, Yahweh Shai, all shall be made alive. And see, as Yahweh Shai, okay, he corrected everything. You know, that's why he was so tapped in, because he knew, all right, he was the beginning of the fall. Okay. So he knew. That's why the scriptures say that the government shall be on his shoulders. Okay, as Yahweh Shai, he came to bear the responsibility of what happened as Adam. Okay, what happened as King Solomon. He came to bear that responsibility and get it right. Okay, but every man in his own order, Yahweh Shai, the first fruits. Afterwards, they that are Yahweh Shai's at his coming, which is links over Revelation 11 and 18. So you have Yahweh Shai, all right? You know, he's the beginning, okay, of their resurrection. He's the first one to complete his regenerations. You know, that's why he doesn't have to come back to the earth anymore. He's perfected. Okay, he's fulfilled his seeds. Okay, which is his reincarnation. Now, all right, we're fulfilling ours. The first fruits of Aratazar, we of that number. All right, afterwards, the rest of the elect, the rest of the 1/3, they that are Yahweh Shai's at his coming. Okay, because it was all build up to this second coming. Okay, in which the kingdom is going to be resurrected. Okay, the kingdom of Israel is going to appear again in the earth. Okay, showing you that this is for one people, man. Okay, it said, then cometh the end when he shall have delivered up the kingdom to the Most High, even the Father, when he shall have put down all rule and all authority and power. Okay, which goes back to what Psalms, okay, 110. Okay, so when you which I'm gonna get this in chat, all right, and then we'll pick up on 24. Okay, our brothers, we pick up at verse 24, but let's get this in chat dealing with the first fruits. Okay, because that expounds on the resurrection some more, you know, because we're going to like I said, this is a heavy chapter. You know, so Paul was, like I said, he was super saiyan in the spirit. But when you go here to I think it's it. Yep. So I asked Chat, I said, how does Yahweh Shai and the first fruits, the believers, tie into the law concerning the first fruits in the Old Testament? All right, it says below is a clear, okay, scriptures, all right, scripture-based explanation on how Yahweh Shai, all right, how Mashiach, the anointed, and the believers' first fruits, all right, relate to the Old Testament law of the first fruits. Okay, it says what were the first fruits in the Old Testament? All right, in the Torah, first fruits were the first portion of a harvest, the earliest and best offered to Yahweh as holy. Key scriptures, Exodus 23 and 19. The first of the first fruits of your land you shall bring into the house of Yahweh. Leviticus 23, verses 9 through 14. All right, during the Passover unleavened bread. In Deuteronomy 26, verses 1 through 11, Israel publicly acknowledged Yahweh's deliverance by offering the first fruits. Okay, purpose, thanksgiving to Yahweh, recognition that the entire harvest belongs to Yahweh, guarantee of the coming full harvest, setting apart what is holy. This becomes the pattern for understanding Yahweh Shai and the believers, how Yahweh Shai feels the law of first fruits. His resurrection equals the first fruits offering. All right, now listen to this. Paul explicitly identifies Yahweh Shai as a prophetic fulfillment, all right, of the wave sheaf, okay, first fruits offering. Okay, it says, but now is back in 1 Corinthians 15 and 20, but now is Yahweh Shai risen from the dead and become the first fruits of them that slept. In Torah, the first sheaf of barley was weighed before Yahweh on the day after the Sabbath during, all right, unleavened bread. This corresponds exactly to Yahweh Shai's resurrection timing. You see? So he even fulfills the law, okay, of the first fruits. Okay, he says he is the first one to rise from the dead to immortality. His resurrection is the guarantee of the future resurrection of all who follow him. Okay, because you will give your first fruits. All right. And those first fruits was a guarantee that the rest of the crops was going to harvest. Okay, which are the believers. You see? So the first fruit was a representation, all right, that the rest of your harvest, all right, that the rest of your crops was going to harvest. So Yahweh Shai, being the first one risen, was the guarantee that the rest of those in Yahweh Shai are going to be risen as well. It said, just as first fruits are holy and belong to Yahweh, Yahweh Shai is set apart, all right, and best offering, all right, is the set apart first and best offering of the human harvest. Okay, thus Yahweh Shai, all right, this is the harvest of Israel, say human, okay, but Israelite harvest. It says, thus Yahweh Shai literally fulfills the first fruit laws through his resurrection. Believers as first fruits united to Yahweh Shai. Not only is Yahweh Shai the first fruits, Scripture also calls believers the first fruits, which this is the 144,000, okay, which represents a portion of the elect, okay. It says the elect believers equal first fruits. It says of his own he brought us forth that we should be. This is James 1:18. Of his own will he brought us forth that we shall be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. You see, these were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto the Most High, to the Lamb. Revelation 14:14. It says, meaning believers, especially the elect, are the first portion of all right. It says humanity, but we know there's Israel. The first portion of Israel claimed by Yahweh through Yahweh Shai, set apart as holy, a guarantee. Okay, so like it says a guarantee that the rest of the coming harvest, because how even the 2/3 are going to come back through the elect, meaning the full redemption of Israel, okay, and ultimately the world under the Messiah's rule, the world of Israel. Okay. It said the laws of the first fruit require that the first, all right, that the first and the best consecrated, all right, and the best be consecrated, symbolizing a people set apart for Yahweh. Okay. So let's get a couple of precepts. All right. We go to Romans chapter. Well, let's get Revelation, then we can take the Romans. All right, this is Revelation 14:4. I'll start at 1. It says Revelation 14:1. All right, the Lamb and the 144,000 on Mount Zion. It says, and I looked, and lo, a lamb. All right, Yahushua stood on Mount Zion. Okay, this is the government. So John is seeing the government. Okay, the future government of Israel. Okay, because the kingdom of Israel is going to be resurrected in the earth. Okay, so that government, all right, those spirits that make up that government are resurrected in the earth, man, will be resurrected, in the coming of Yahushua. It says, and with him 144,000 having his father's name written in their foreheads, okay, which means that we will be sealed with those names, man, that authority, the name of the Father and the Son. All right, Yahweh Shai. And I heard a voice from heaven as the voice of many waters, and as the voice of a great thunder, and I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. Okay? And they sung as it were a new song. Okay? We're singing a new song, the refreshed song, and we have the complete song. We're able to hit all the notes, okay, of this song. All right, as we have the complete understanding because we're at the time of all things being fulfilled. Okay, and they sung as it were a new song before the throne and before the four beasts and the elders, and no man could learn that song but the 144,000 which were redeemed, okay, from the earth. These are they, all right, which were not defiled with women, for they are virgin. These are they, all right, this is speaking spiritual virgins, man. And these women represent philosophies. Okay, read Proverbs the 7th chapter. Okay. It says, these are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto the Most High and to the Lamb. Okay? These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto the Most High and to the Lamb. There's 144,000. You go into the first fruits. Okay? All right. So you go into the first fruits. Okay, in the Greek is a parquet.
Strong's G 536. Aparche. Aparche.
All right. And it says to offer. All right. Firstlings or first fruits. Okay. And it says person superior and excellent to others of the same class. Okay. Person superior and excellent to others of the same class. Okay. So you have your Yahushua. Okay. Those first fruits. All right. Then you have what the rest of the, elect. Okay. So Yahushua's resurrection was a guarantee that, okay, the rest of Israel would be harvested. Okay, that was a guarantee from the Father. All right, Yahushua's resurrection was a guarantee that we all will be risen in glory. Okay, whether we be changed, okay, or whether we, have to die and be, okay, risen at the time of Yahushua, well, we all gonna be risen to glory. Okay, so you go to the book of Romans 8, and we'll end it here. It's the book of Romans chapter 8 and verse 28. You will read 28, and point being 29. It says, Romans 8 and 28 says, and we know that all things work together for good to them, all right, that love the Most High, to them who are called according to his purpose. Okay, so everything works in our favor, man. The Lord got it set up to where the elect win regardless. Those that are Yahushua, we win regardless. Okay, it said, for whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. Okay, the firstborn, the first fruits among many brethren, man. Okay, so Yahushua, his resurrection represents the first fruit. Okay, they guarantee the rest of the harvest, man. All right, so that was the point, Lord will. All right, you brothers. All right, and you sisters edified once again. I want to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushua, Bahashem, Rakakwadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples to his younger brothers, and peace and blessing salutations to the hopeful Shalom.